Welcome everyone to Choice Conversations, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your life, one choice at a time. I'm your host, Chris Stefanik. Let's do this. All right, gang. I've got a very special show for you all today. Today I'm interviewing David Allen. He is the author of Getting Things Done, which is only one of the most influential books on my life out there. Why do I say that about a productivity book, essentially? A productivity system, a time management system, a way to get things done system? Well, it's because I'm using it every day, and not just at work. I'm using it pretty much from morning to night, from when I wake up to when I go to bed. It's kind of a way of life. It's a way to, once you learn it, change the way you think, really. It enables you to be present and relaxed in your daily life because you've got a handle on all the things that you need to get done. And you've got a system for managing that. And it's just the ramifications of that are really very far-reaching. So, for one, stress levels are lower. Stress is, of course, something that's very impactful on health. So, reducing that stress, that's tremendous. Of course, there's the obvious stuff like being more successful in financial your financial endeavors. Being successful in your day job, or if you're an entrepreneur, because you're able to get more stuff done, knocking out more things on the honey-do list, right? But also because it really is a tool that's great for giving you presence, that helps you to live life more to the fullest, right? Your presence is really there. It helps to improve your relationships because you're really there and present when you're with people. You're not thinking about when you have to clean the garage out or what projects you have to do for work or that sort of thing. Really, really impactful book when I think about the ramifications on my life. One of the most impactful, just because I'm living the system morning to night. It is a way of life. So check it out. I think you'll like it. Awesome system for productivity and just really rocking out life, really improving all areas of your life. So very much in line with the theme of this podcast. But before I bring you this episode, I did want to take a couple seconds to just say thank you to my patrons over at patreon.com. For those of you who are not aware, the best way to support this show is to go to patreon.com/choiceconversations and sign up to be a patron. That will get you my love and admiration in addition to a lot of good bonus content. And you can even sign up, depending on the levels you pledge for, to get some one-on-one coaching with me and the like. Choice Conversations on patreon.com. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. All right, now here's the episode with David. David, hey, welcome to Choice Conversations.
Chris, delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, it is my pleasure. So, for my listeners who might not be familiar with who you are and your work, if you could maybe just kind of tell us, how did you get to where you are now? So, of course, you've got Getting Things Done, the books you've written about this. You've got you're a trainer and a teacher and a coach and these sort of things. How did you get to that point where, I guess, first of all, start off with what is Getting Things Done, just a real high level, and we'll get in more of the nuts and bolts later.
Sure.
And then how did you come about developing it?
Yeah, well, Getting Things Done is really a description of a set of best practices that I uncovered and kind of cobbled together to make more conscious for people to be able to use over the last 35 years, actually, that I've been working with, this material in some form. And it basically are the things that you need to do to be able to minimize distractions in your head, create more clear space so you can really focus more on the meaningful things, whether that's watch your daughter play soccer or write a business plan, but to get more room in your head and to get rid of the pressures and the stresses that occur when people actually try to manage their life in their head, which is absolutely the wrong place. So there was no one big epiphany over the years. I started with my own small consulting practice back in the early 80s and then uncovered some of these techniques, mostly for me, sort of to keep my head clear as my life was getting more mature and complex and busy. And I loved, early on, I loved the idea of clear space. I loved having a clear head. I'd had a good bit of martial arts training, my spiritual practices, and so forth. So, when you have a clear head, you can see further. You can, you're smarter. You're more elegant. You have less stress. And so that was something I loved personally. But then as I was just discovering these techniques, I turned around and used them with my clients in my consulting business and discovered that these techniques were absolutely bulletproof, and they produced exactly the same results for anybody else as they did for me. So I began cobbling those together, and then at some point had the head of human resources for a major U.S. corporation saw what I was doing, and he said, "Wow, we need that in our culture. Can you design a training program around this?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a shot." And so I spent a couple of months with his team developing a personal productivity seminar for managers and executives. Actually, this was Lockheed, 1983-84. And we did a pilot program for 1,000 of them, and it would just absolutely work in spades. So that was just a beginning, and I still didn't know what I'd actually figured out because I really was not in the corporate training world myself. But because it seemed to hit a nerve, I just kept going. It was a good job. People seemed to think that it seemed to handle all those things that all those companies, stress management, prioritization, organization, productivity, all those sort of check boxes that human resources or training and development wanted to check off.
Right.
It actually got addressed by all of those got addressed by this. And so then let's fast forward. I just pretty much ran my own sort of boutique little consulting practice with a partner or two. And then it took me 25 years to actually figure out that what I'd figured out was unique, that nobody else seemed to have figured it out. And so I decided, I guess I better write the manual then. So I wrote the book, Getting Things Done, in 2001. And that started to scale this. And there's kind of the brand sort of took out from under me. I'd never really done any marketing or whatever, but GTD started to become sort of a global thing, especially in the tech world. So that sort of spread me out there. So, up to current time, we're, basically not with, I don't have a big company, but we're basically sort of partnering this intellectual property or this methodology with, people around the world and in the United States to help sort of train this and spread the word. So there's a very short version of a very long story, Chris.
Right. Sure. No, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so you talk about the benefits of clearing space in your head and how that allows you to be more elegant and with stress management and stuff like that. Why don't you talk a little bit about how GTD gets that done for you?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the 20-second version. Anything that's potentially meaningful you can't finish the moment you think of it, you need to capture outside your head in some trusted bucket. Sooner than later, decide exactly what you're going to do about it. Like what's the next action on it? If it's something to take action on, what's the outcome you're trying to accomplish? And you need to define those, and then you need to organize those reminders in some appropriate then system outside your head that then you step back and reflect and review on some consistent basis and keep current. So then you make good trusted choices about what you're doing. And you're not distracted, and you're operating from a sense of confidence instead of a sense of hope. But that requires you to essentially build the external brain. As the cognitive scientist in the last 10 years, actually since I even wrote the book, a lot of research has been done in cognitive science that basically have proven that your head is a really lousy office. Most people are still trying to use their head for prioritizing, for remembering, for reminding, for all kinds of things. And so I just developed the methodology and uncovered it about how do you build the external brain so that your head's quiet while you still have a very busy life.
Right. Yeah, I've been using Getting Things Done for a few years now, and I'm all in. So I'm using it not just for my work, but for everything in my, things in my personal life, my passions, my hobbies, for this podcast. And yeah, when I have something comes up, I take note of it no matter where I'm out. I'm using actually the secret weapon version of Getting Things Done, which for those of you who are not familiar, it's just a methodology of using the tool Evernote to implement Getting Things Done from David. So, and I really like that. So, but I'll be out walking the dog or whatever, and something will pop in my head, and I'll just pull up Evernote, make a quick note, and then I can go back to enjoying my walk. Or, sometimes I'm in the middle of a book, an audiobook. So I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm walking, or sometimes podcasts. And I'm like, wow, that's a really great idea, or that really sparked something. And I'll pause it, bring up Evernote, put a note in, and then go back to giving my full concentration to it. And what would have happened in the past is either the idea would have popped in my head and then would have immediately left, and I would have just lost it, this great insight or whatever. Or it would have been in my head and I'd have been really thinking about that, and I would not have been paying any attention to the audiobook, would just be going on, and I'd be like, okay, I don't know what just happened in the last 2 chapters, or, I wouldn't be able to just appreciate the time being out with, on the phone or on the walk rather, and I end up, I've got some really nice nature trails around my house that I enjoy walking and look, taking that in, and just the ability that it allows me to be focused in the present moment and really live in the present moment and appreciate it. It's just, it's really fantastic what that does, and the peace of mind that provides,
I know it's great, Chris, and thanks. That's a great testimonial. What's so bizarre about it is how simple this is. I mean, it's not rocket science unless, of course, you're building rockets. And I
recommend all rocket science.
Rocket scientists who actually use GTD, absolutely. But it's very simple, and those are not behaviors people are not familiar with. Everybody knows how to write things down. It's just, I think, that people, your mind is so seductive that most people, you've heard of emotional intelligence, which is, neat, good idea that you need to be mature emotionally and know how to create great relationships. But GTD is much more like mental intelligence. Don't let your mind run you. If you've ever changed your mind, who did that?
Right.
And most people are letting their minds run them. As you said before, you'd have a good idea, and your mind will try to convince you, because it's so obvious when you're thinking of it, you don't need to capture it, that it'll be there permanently.
Right.
And then 2 minutes later, when you're thinking of the next cool thing, you forgot the first thing.
Right.
But it actually didn't go away. It'd be nice if it truly went away, so it didn't bother you. The problem was that you sublimated that agreement with yourself. Wow, that's a good idea. I should do something with that. But then you lost track of that consciously, but it's still going on unconsciously. And that's where a whole lot of the pressure that people are feeling is coming from, is these subliminal agreements with themselves that they make that they're not being appropriately engaged with or managing, externally. And then that part of your psyche has no sense of past or future. So all you're doing is loading in how many things you think you ought to be doing instead of talking to me right now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Then you're not present with anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that, I'm so much better at, having good presence now that I've got getting things done. And it's funny. I just recently I had this project that I was working on, and normally I'm really in the moment, and whenever I've completed what a next action and one project, I'm on to the next one, and sometimes that next action might be it's time for some leisure or something like that, right? And I'm in that moment, whatever it is, really enjoying the leisure, enjoying the time with my family, really focused on the project at hand, whatever it is, and I'm not worried about other stuff. And I found myself it was even in a leisure moment or time with family, thinking about this project. And I'm I was like, wow, I haven't had one of these moments in a long time. Because of David, I'm like, I remember when this used to be my life all the time. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of silly that I'm doing it now. It's totally covered in my secret weapon, my getting things done system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to worry about this at all. When I'm at the point when I'm ready to work on that project, I know exactly where I'm at because I've got it all under control. And then went back to enjoying the time with my family, right? But yeah, it was a funny reminder that just happened just this week, where I was like, I remember what this was like. I used to do this all the time. So yeah, but you're absolutely right. The way it works, the way the brain will have that that little itch under the surface if you don't have a system that it can trust to manage things.
the real reason for this is like, yeah, a clear head is a nice place to be, but in order to do what? Well, basically, in order to do the more meaningful things and to be much more available to them and to be able to mine the gold out of those things. I mean, that's really the reason for this. So GTD, over all these years and the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've implemented, versions of it and parts of it or all of it. What it does, people don't need time. They need space. You don't need any more, it doesn't take any time to have a good idea or to be loving with your kids, or to connect with your higher power. That doesn't take time. It takes room. And what takes up room are all these things we're talking about. If you're not managing those appropriately and externalizing them so your head can let it go, then you don't have the room cognitively or internally to be able to then give these things the attention that they really deserve. So some people use this space to be more creative. I mean, I got all kinds of, Robert Downey Jr. is a big champion of my stuff. Howard Stern's a big champion of my stuff. So even in the creative fields, a lot of people think, well, this is organization and structure. Well, it's exactly the organization and structure you need so you can be more creative. Some people, I'm coaching some CEOs right now, and they're using it to be able to see from a higher horizon on a more regular basis and to make better strategic decisions and not get so spun out of control that they then infect everybody around them with their virus of stress. That's a huge, huge benefit for this. And some people just use it just as you say, just to be present, just to be able to watch your kids play soccer and not be on your iPhone.
Right.
What a deal.
Yeah. There's so many benefits, so the priorities things, I have a mastermind group where, for those of you who aren't familiar with a mastermind group it's just when a group of like-minded individuals get together to support each other and help each other out. And it's a place where you can get advice from others who you have something in common, so maybe some common goals, that you're looking to reach, so it's something that is used a lot by businessmen and the like, but it can be a tool that anyone could use really. So at any rate, I'm in my mastermind group and people were talking about, someone was saying the issue they were having was around priorities and this high priority items were not getting done, and I recommended getting things done. And I was like, I always know what my highest priority items are. It's right there at a fingertip away, and I never have to worry about like what's my highest priority thing, and I could just bring it up in the system, and it's right there. So it's a piece of cake, and it's broken out by different contexts, So the context of, if I'm at my computer, there are certain tasks I can do. Where if I'm out in my car driving around town, there are other tasks I can do. Where if I'm at home and, there's work to be done in the backyard or whatever, there are other tasks that can be done there that couldn't be done in those other places, right? And I can just break it out by, okay, I'm in this context right now. What are my highest priorities? And it's never a problem. And so for me, it's like if something needs to get done and it's not getting done, I just, in the system within my weekly review, I will go in there and just adjust the priorities and say, okay, this thing needs to be made a priority over the other stuff. And I never have to guess what it is I should be working on. I could always just go in, okay, what should I be working on? Well, there's my priorities. It takes that decision out of the way, really. That in the moment anyway. At some point you have to decide what's going to be your priorities, but I can do that when I'm in a space for deciding what my priorities are for the week or for the day. And then when I'm in the space where I'm just ready to just tear in and be productive, I will just look down at my list of priorities. Or maybe I'm in a space where I'm not really feeling so productive, but I, normally if I didn't have a system like getting things done to fall back on, I might go check email or go check Facebook and just blow the afternoon that way. I can look at getting things done, my system, and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I still have A, B, and C that need to get done before the end of the week. Why don't I work on one of those? Because I didn't have to make that decision. It was already made for me and is there for me to see, just a finger press away on my phone, right?
Yeah. Here's the problem though, Chris, as you can probably guess. Most people listening to this are going, oh my God, that sounds so cool. And it sounds like a lot of work. Oh God, I could never do all that. Because Chris, you're a highly motivated guy. You're a motivational guy. You're doing all that, but I can't do all that. So So, the biggest challenge I've had over these 35 years is trying to convince people you do need to invest something. It's like you need to think about your stuff more than you think, but not as much as you're afraid you might. So you have to jump into this thing, not knowing exactly how you're going to do it, but realizing that there actually is light at the end of the tunnel when you do it. So let me ask you a question then. How did you come across this, and what were your biggest challenges and wins as you began to implement this? I'm curious. So I think folks might like to hear, how would somebody who didn't know about this suddenly know about this, and how'd you get in? Then how'd you engage?
Sure. So yeah, I'd absolutely like to give credit to my friend and a gentleman who's been on my podcast before. His name's Brett Venat. He runs the School Sucks Project, and I believe you've been on his show as well. I know that if not, I know he at least did a whole series on getting things done, a productivity series where he did several shows talking about getting things done, and he's a big proponent of it as well. So that's how I found out about it, and I started using it. And I guess you said, like, what are some of my struggles with it? Well, what I found initially was it was really great at getting things out of my head and allowing me to be very productive and get things, get a lot of things done. Go figure. But what I wasn't doing initially, and it took probably a couple years for me to go back and really appreciate this, was I was being productive. I was getting a lot of things done, but I wasn't necessarily progressing on reaching my goals, like my life goals, that at a rate that I was happy with. And this is where things that we can get into in a little bit here, like a monthly review and doing the weekly review, a monthly review, to kind of look at, okay, am I setting my priorities in the right way? And then realizing that once you start using getting things done, you are so much more efficient that it's now like, okay, I feel like I have the time to do whatever it is I want. I just need to make it a priority. So then it's like, okay, well, what should my priorities be if my life goals are X, Y, and Z? Right? So, that was the struggle initially, is I was being really productive and I was doing a lot of things, but I wasn't necessarily, I was just doing work and not really adding progressing towards my life goals and, increasing the meaning in my life.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, let me stop you there.
Sure.
Let you catch a breath. But that actually is a typical, I say typical, it's typical for people who buy into this sort of in spades to begin with, as you obviously did. But what's typical then is that you get so enthralled with getting things done, you start getting more and more done, and then getting more and more done, and then getting more and more done. And at some point you go, wait a minute, I'm toast. Is this really what this is about? Mm-hmm. And then the revisit of, the different horizons. Well, wait a minute, what really is important to me? And is just being successful and thrilled with the fact that I can crank out more stuff. Is that really what I'm about? So that's a very elegant place to get to. And obviously you did, in terms of that. But that's typical. And 2 years is about the time that takes, because it takes about 2 years to sort of get this methodology, this martial art, essentially, under your belt, so that you're not like, of course I get my in-basket empty every, 24, 48, 72 hours. Of course I decide next actions on things, but then understanding what the content is that you then need to throw into your system, and how do you start to then identify the more subtle open loops in your life, that then allows you to get to those higher levels. That's why this is not a one-time event. This is a lifestyle learning, essentially, of how do you manage the flow of life's work. How do you define what your life's work is? And then how do you manage its flow once you're engaged here in the material world with it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it. It's really, really simple, but there are subtleties to implementing it and maximizing the impact that it has on your life, right?
No kidding. Yeah.
It's one of those things that once, read it, start using it, then after a couple months, read it again. And then, maybe a year or two later, read it again, because each time you're going to pick up new things.
I had somebody, Chris, tell me they'd read the book 10 times.
Yeah.
And it was a totally different book every time they read it. I understand that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I rewrote it. I wrote a new edition of it last year. And it was even very fascinating to me to rewrite it because I literally retyped the whole manuscript and said, okay, would I still say it this way 15 years later? And it was fascinating to me. I learned a lot, how much that I had learned over the last 15 years about, as you mentioned, the subtleties of this and the nuances, that show up.
Right. Yeah, so I'm wondering what would be the most valuable spot to go with to our listeners next. So I could talk about how there's some efficiencies gained through it. We could look more into what that process of the monthly review.
Let's drop down into the weeds here and say, okay, if somebody seems to be motivated, what should they do?
Okay.
Once they get off this podcast or stop listening to this. There are some basic critical elements that most people need to get a lot more comfortable and a lot more familiar with. First of all, it's called pen and paper. Come on, guys, no Wi-Fi required. And so the 5 steps, as you know, there are 5 stages that I identified that we use to get any situation more under control and more meaningfully focused. And this will be true for your kitchen, your company, or your consciousness. And the first stage is to capture the things that are not on cruise control. What's got your attention? So the first thing anybody listening to this should say is, okay, if you weren't listening to this, or probably while you were listening to this, where did your mind go? Oh, I need cat food. Oh, I need a life. Oh, I got to rewrite the business plan. Oh, I got to remember to pick up my kids. Whatever. Wherever that is, those are the things. You don't have to go very far. All you have to do is start to pay attention to what's grabbing your attention. And then you need to capture it. You need to externalize it. Write it down, if nothing else. Or you could record it. And you've obviously built a pretty sophisticated system, so you can use the digital world for that. But that's dangerous unless you really have this habit really down. Otherwise, it kind of goes into a black hole. But most of my capturing is done with pen and paper. Mm-hmm. So right now, I'm sitting at my desk. I have a pad and a pen right at hand. So, because God knows when the lightning will strike and an idea will show up or input will show up or whatever that I need to grab that. 80% of those I throw away, but 20% are, there's gold to be mined in terms of what that is and what I need to potentially do about it. So the first step is to capture. Grab anything that's got your attention, little or big, personal or professional, get it out of your head and throw it into an in basket. First of all, get an in basket, physical.
Yes.
Most people don't even have a physical in basket. So you need some place to capture all the stuff that shows up before you can then decide exactly what you need to do with it. So the receipts, the business cards, the mail, all that stuff, as well as the notes you take in meetings and all that needs to go into a collection bucket. So the first step is to make sure that you've captured raw data or raw triggers of things that are potentially meaningful that you need to then later decide about what to do about it. So then you need to do step 2 and step 3, which is then decide or clarify what exactly does that note mean? Do I need to take an action on that? Is there something I need to do about that? And is there any project I've now committed to complete based upon what those meeting notes were or what that piece of mail is? And so the second step is to clarify. That is to determine exactly, is this trash? Is it reference material? Is it something I need to move on? And if it is something I need to move on, what's the next action? And if one action won't finish it, what's the project? So those are some key questions. There's no tool that can help you do that except your forebrain. That's it's the thinking required and decision-making required that you need to do about each email, each piece of mail, each thought, each whatever that you have. So That's step 2. Step 3, if you decide, hey, mom's birthday is coming up and I need to give her a party. My next action on this is to call my sister, but I can't call her right now. Step 3 is then to organize it. So I'm sure you're using Evernote as an organization system as well that'll let you know, here are the calls I need to make, here's the stuff I need to talk to X, Y, and Z people about, et cetera. And you can then keep track of those things you've decided that you need to be reminded of in the appropriate location or context. That's step 3 is then organize, put these things in the right categories so you have them available to you. Step 4 is then to make sure that you look at these things and keep them current. Are these the 5 things I really need to bring up at the board meeting? Do I have them all in front of me? Are these the 7 things I need from the hardware store? Do I have all that in front of me? So you need to step back and review and reflect on the content while you're in these contexts. So then step 5, you say, yeah, hey, cool. I know everything I need from the hardware store that we're all probably next actions on something I saw around the house I needed to do or wanted to do, and the next step was to buy this at the hardware store. Those are now all grouped together. And so your reflection process is just to use the system. Essentially, you use your brain to review the external brain you've created and its contents to then make good, trusted choices. Now, that, in essence, is really all the GTD process is about. But that's how you would go about implementing this. So, we still coach people one-on-one. Sit down at the desk. The first thing we'd have you do is dump everything out of your head on separate pieces of paper. Throw them into your in tray. Then we're going to spend the rest of that's going to take 1 to 6 hours, by the way, for most mid to senior level professionals, just to even capture what's got their attention. Right. So, and then it's going to take the rest of a couple of days, to go through each one of those items and make those decisions they've been avoiding. Wait a minute, what's the next action on this? Is this something to act on? And so, what's the next action? Oh God, I guess I need to. And so then we're going to walk people through that decision making process. So, you don't have to. Anybody listening to this, if you're unfamiliar with it, as soon as you get off the podcast, or put this on pause, just jot down the top 10 things on your mind right now, little or big. Just jot them down. Then take the next few minutes and go through each one and say, what's the very next action I need to take on this? And write that down and see how that feels. So people often ask, well, how long does it take to start to experience the benefits of this? I say, well, as long as it takes to write down 10 things and decide the next action on each one and then watch, that's how long it takes to start to experience the value of these simple but quite profound behaviors and practices.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about it, you're talking about next actions, which is something we haven't, explicitly defined or anything, but it's pretty obvious, I guess, based on the wording for it. But once you do start to explicitly define what these things are, it's amazing just how much more clear they are. You might write down, you do this exercise, you write down the 10 things that are on your mind, and then you write out the next actions for them. None of those, you could look at them and be like, none of these were like aha moments. None of these were like, oh my God, it's like, yeah, I knew that. But even though it's so simple and you knew all of this anyway, there's some magic about explicitly declaring it and getting it out of your head and knowing exactly what that next action is. Maybe it took you a minute to think of it, but it's like you knew that. It wasn't like that was performing brain surgery or something.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit there, Chris. Most people don't know that. If they actually knew it might make a better difference. But believe me, I have spent thousands of hours sitting with some of the best, brightest, and most sophisticated people on the planet, watching them go, what's next on that? Oh, God, oh, no, wait a minute, I can't do that. Oh, that's right, I need to find out from... Yeah, but before I do... They don't know it. And that's the cognitive horsepower that you actually have to apply to this, is figuring out actually what the next actions are. Once they figure them out, they'll go, well, yeah, it's a common sense process to go through that thinking process. But most people do that thinking process when it blows up instead of when it shows up. Yeah, I'll decide the next action on Mom's birthday, but most people decide that when Mom's birthday was yesterday, as opposed to, oh, wait a minute, her birthday's coming up in 6 weeks. What's the next step on that? Oh, I need to call my sister. But see, if you haven't decided that, by the way, most executives that I work with, I have to warn their direct reports that laxative is about to hit their boss's brain. Because as I start to work with an executive and get them to make next action decisions about some of these key things that are on their mind, a gazillion of them are delegated. They just can't delegate it until they figure out what the action is. They still got to hang on to it. So there's things constipate uphill, not down in organizations. Simply because it gets more sophisticated, more ambiguous, in the kind of decisions that you have to make, the more mature you get in your professional world. But that's why oftentimes they are the bottleneck, simply because they've avoided thinking about and deciding what the next step is. So they're sitting there with the stress of this huge major project, implement diversity in my 6,000 person workforce, or potentially research the merger with company X, Y, and Z. And they just haven't sat down and forced themselves to decide, wait a minute, what's the very, very, very next thing I need to do to move the needle on this? So that's my pushback is it is not obvious. That's why you actually have to start to train yourself. It's a cognitive muscle you actually have to train to think about what's the next action on mom's birthday? What's the next action on this potential merger? What's the next action on the light bulb that just blew out on my porch?
Right.
You'd be amazed at how many people have a lot of things. If you just decided the next action on all the stuff around your house or your apartment or wherever you live, if you walk around that has your attention, that needs fixing, changing, getting rid of, buying, adding to, or whatever, you'd be amazed.
Yeah, I could see that.
How many things will happen at the hardware store tomorrow?
Yeah, I can see that. Now, you had said that people will be putting off dealing with some of these things. They don't know what the next action is because they've been putting it off, even high-level executives. Have you been able to discern maybe what some of the factors are that lead to people doing that, as you've worked with all these different clients through the years?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. The biggest human fear is the fear of being out of control. You didn't wake up, Chris, this morning and say, wow, I can't wait to get out and be a jerk today. That's not exactly your motivational factor. And by the way, the fear of being out of control, people are killing themselves and each other as we're speaking here, just to try to maintain or achieve a sense of psychological control. It's that powerful a driver of human behavior. For us more normal, sane people, the way that tends to show up is we'll tend to avoid hopping into anything that we're not clear we can engage with control immediately. So clean my garage. Mice, dirt, crap, stuff. Think I throw away too many things to think about. I quit. You don't even want to look in your garage. That's because you're so smart and intelligent that in 2 seconds you freak yourself out with all kinds of creative ideas about how bad this would be. In other words, you throw yourself out of control just thinking about something that you don't know exactly what to do next about because it has so many factors and so many things you're going to need to deal with. So the whole idea of sort of getting it down to, well, wait a minute. If you're going to clean your garage, what's the very first thing you need to do? Oh, God, I got this old refrigerator in there. I really need to talk to Harriet and see if she wants it. Great. That I can handle. Pick up phone, punch numbers, call Harriet. That I can feel like I can engage with control. So figuring out the next action allows you to start to be engaged in a way of feeling I'm now in control of the situation, though I don't know how I have the whole situation handled. I'm in control with how to start to engage and start to move forward. So it's really not about, the big secret, Chris, is getting things done. It's not so much about getting things done. It's really more about being appropriately engaged with your life. Mm. How do you need to be appropriately engaged with your garage you keep telling yourself you ought to clean up? Well, you better decide, well, first of all, am I committed to having a clean garage? So you could put it on someday, maybe. Say, someday I'll get around to the garage, and that's fine. But if you say, I do need to clean it up because, we can't get in there or we've got other things to do or we're going to move or whatever, I got to clean it up. So then you say, okay, now I got a project. Clean garage goes on your project list. So what's the very, 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 very next action on that? And if you can actually hold yourself down to a physical, visible, very next real thing to do, it'll start to make you feel I am now appropriately engaged. It may take me 6 months to clean my garage or 6 days or 6 hours, I don't know. But at least, because you don't have to finish it to be appropriately engaged. What you do have to do is decide what's the outcome I'm committed to and what's the very next thing I need to do about it. See, if you like basketball or football or soccer or any of that, guess what any player is most focused on when they're on the field? Where's the goal and what's the next play? Mm-hmm. Right? Where's the goal and what's the next play? You may have a strategy, but that next play, you need to take the next play, then find out what you need to go from there, and then find out where you go from there. But you damn well better figure out what the next play is.
Sure.
So you think that's any different with the game of life? Hey, what's the goal? Clean garage. What's the next play? Call Harriet. You got it. But most people avoid that thinking process, and that's all I did was identify this thought process. That it's a fundamental thinking process about productivity, outcome, and action. Right. What are we trying to produce? How do we allocate resources to make it happen? And most people are not trained to think that way.
Oh, not at all. Yeah. I would say that, the brain doesn't really work this way, which is why we need it. Because, if the brain just naturally worked this way, you wouldn't even need to worry about it. It'd be second nature. Right. And, why this isn't required learning, I don't know. I had to take geometry in high school and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't think outside of a geometry class I've ever used geometry, or all these other things I had to learn, that I don't use anymore. And yet, like something like this, which allows people so much ability to, one, be productive and to quote unquote get things done, but to be creative, to reach their goals, to have less stress, which has health benefits and improve their relationships, by being able to be present and all these other benefits to it. It's like these are skills that everyone should learn, And I guess with that in mind, how would you recommend if you're somebody that has getting things done, you're sold. I'm all about getting things done, but I want to get this implemented at my place of business. What's the best way to go about that? Or I want to get this implemented in my family. Because as I'm sure you're aware, I mean, some people will push back when you say, oh, hey, this is a great thing. You should try it. And they're like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. What have you seen as far as successful strategies for rolling this out?
Forget it.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that easy?
Oh, come on. Prophets are never understood in their home countries, and good ideas usually in the family are not accepted that immediately. I say that I don't want to be too glib about it, but I've never found a formula other than people who take to this are the people who need it the least. They're already the most aspirational, productive, positively focused people, but they already know the value of a system. They just know their systems can't manage what they're now dealing with in their life. And those are the people who are the first takers of GTD and the most people are most attracted to it. So if somebody's not in that state, how to convince them that they ought to be, just because you don't like the fact that they've got stuff strewn all over the house and aren't managing next actions on stuff and aren't, keeping track of things they're waiting on to come from other people, and they follow up when it blows up instead of when it shows up. The fact that trying to get them to understand that, you can elegantly suggest, or give them my book, come on, say, hey, you might want to read this. Maybe we'll get it, whatever.
Right.
But I've never found a profile other than people who assume that their life needs and wants to be better 18 months from now. And so, executives, people at the C-suite, they're not, they've already made it to some level of degree, unless they're lifelong learners, and there are many of them. And so, they often will take to it simply as the next step, to be able to then, manage their retirement, manage other things even more elegantly. It's kind of hard to say, because you can't really legislate system to anybody. You can only hold people accountable to deliverables. Sure. So if you're trying to manage people and they report to you from some sort of a hierarchical business standpoint, then sure, you can say, hey, excuse me, give me a list of all the projects you've got going right now. And if they don't have one, fire them. Or, hey, here's what I mean by a project list. Let me show you mine. Right? Say, oh, okay, cool. So obviously modeling the behavior, looking, and by the way, if you're trying to teach your teenagers, give up. Just look like you're having fun. And when they ask you what you're doing, say you're not old enough. And then they'll go, well, wait, come on, hell now, whatever. So
I like that.
So they're
you're not old enough.
Lots of tips and tricks. A lot of ways you could try to play the game. But you just need to make sure you're doing it, because it's going to move up the food chain all of your intersections with anybody. If they see you tracking stuff, they see you leaving work early enough, they see you not stressed out, they see you being present with your stuff, and somebody asks you how you're doing that, that's the great opening.
Right.
You need to make sure you're modeling it. And, of course, teaching it to somebody else. If your kids are open to what you're doing, God, that's a great time to do it. We're now teaching kids 7, 8, 9 years old this whole process.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And they get it. Their capture tool is just to make sure they pull all the stuff out of their pack they accumulated during the week.
Right.
In school.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still deciding, what do I need to do about it? They're still, they're doing weekly reviews. I've got a teacher in Minnesota that's, teaching 7, 8, 9-year-olds. He's got all the weekly review steps up on the wall. And so they love at the end of the week, they do their weekly review so they can get to being creative and do creative projects, because they've cleaned up their pack and they've done their math homework. Now they're free to be creative. I mean, how cool is that?
Right.
So I think kids can get this. I mean, that's the hope of the future, is basically all of us, we're all cranky adults. You got to find somebody who's really willing to change some of their habits that they grew up with. But kids, you can get it to them pretty fast.
Sure.
And you may have learned, Chris, I don't know, but if you try to teach this to somebody, you'll learn it the best.
Right.
So if you can find somebody who's open to it, try to communicate to them what this is and how you're doing it and what you think, your understanding of it. It'll let you know what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that'll help reinforce it a ton.
Yeah, I guess it's like, all of the most important things in life, the best way to share it with others is to model it. Mm-hmm. And then hope for the best kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, pretty much the best thing really the only thing you can do for people is, you give them deliverables and hold them accountable for that. And how they get there, that's up to them. And I wouldn't want to dictate to people, like I have in my day job, people that work for me, and I do not dictate to them solutions. If I see them obviously going down a really bad road, I might just point out that, hey, just so you know, there's another way to do this that I found to be really valuable. If you're interested, here's the documentation on it or whatever,
Yeah.
But I just ask for deliverables, and how they get there, I leave it up to them.
Yeah, good for you.
I wouldn't want it any other way, and including the people that are asking me for deliverables, right? So, and you don't want to stifle innovation and things like that, and personal preference and the like. So, but yeah, one thing I would be excited to see in the future, and this could be the future of getting things done, is artificial intelligence. So, I'm seeing like a program in your phone, it's like a variant of Siri, right? Where, maybe it's David. I don't know. Like, David, could you take a note about this for me? Or David, I need to get flowers for my mom's birthday or whatever. And it just automatically knows, maybe beneath the hood, it's doing all these things that you talk about in the book, like, putting things into different categories, like the who, what, when, where, why kind of thing, and creating reminders and calendars and the like. But it's just giving you a very human interface to it. Mm-hmm. And it might have to ask some clarifying questions, like, you say, well, I need to clean out the garage. It might have to ask you, okay, so what would be the first thing you would need to do if you wanted to clean out the garage? And say, oh, that's a good question, Dave. That's a good question, Siri. I guess I need to, call Harriet see if she's interested in the refrigerator. Okay. They ask some clarifying questions, but otherwise it would just handle this for you. And I'm like, that could be really, really helpful. And I don't think it would take that highly advanced of an artificial intelligence. We wouldn't have to have it be at human level intelligence, right? It could be something much less than that to be able to just manage your GTD system for you. Mm-hmm. So, I did a whole series on artificial intelligence because one of the things I'm pretty excited about looking at the future. And there's probably, considering how great just, Siri is right now, they probably have artificial intelligence at a high enough level right now to do this if you got the programmers to put it together for you. Is that something you've ever considered or looked at?
Oh, yeah. Well, I partnered with Intentional Software for 3 years. Charles Simonier, the guy who built Office and Word and Excel, for Microsoft. And looked at whether the technology was there or the market was there. The problem is that neither's ready for that yet. Mm-hmm. Because you're not going to give up Evernote. But you want a dashboard, right? They can then pull stuff from Evernote and then put it back into it. But that's an issue legally and technology wise. And if that was just Evernote, how about Dropbox? How about Office? How about Gmail? How about, yada, 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 all the other stuff that you have that you're probably not going to give up. So unless you could build a system truly from scratch, because the technology is just not there yet. So let me give you the clue about that. I'm with you, though. Believe me, I drew screens in 1995 about what GTD would look like, and nobody's come close yet. But the technology is there; just nobody's thought that it was either capable enough or, Lotus Notes and Microsoft Office and Gmail, they sort of took over the desktop. So because your system is going to have to integrate with both calendar and email and all your electronic communication. So just long story short, there's just way too much there and not enough need from the market. The market doesn't think they need any of that. The market would be they're barely overwhelmed with what they currently got, much less something they'd have to figure out how to use that with. But I'm with you. Right. And I know exactly what that would be because it's all decision support. hey, I'm going home this weekend, and what do I need to know about my kids? That should be instantly available in a hologram, for you.
Right.
And that you can control that, and you can program it, and you can decide how you want that information back to you when you want it, in what context. But that'll be a while. But yeah, great dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a flow chart, right? You have a flow chart that you go through, and that gets you there. So it wouldn't be that complex to program. And as far as like interfacing with a variety of programs, I mean, if the AI is doing the interfacing with the program and you're just interfacing with the AI, you don't care if on the back end it's using Evernote,
correct,
or it's using some other tool, it's using Google Drive, or it's using some proprietary solution. You don't care because you're just dealing with this human interface, right?
Sure.
So I think that becomes pretty easy. And if you wanted it to be used for different kinds of software, you would have, I'm imagining something just like macros, that a macro that runs on your phone or on your desktop or whatever, that just opens up a program and makes an entry into it just as you would if you were doing it manually. But yeah, we're going to see stuff like that, pretty soon, I think. I mean, I think AI is progressing at a real nice rate.
Yeah. Have you read Kevin Kelly's book, The Inevitable?
I've not.
Then you and your listeners should get it. He was the founding editor of Wired, and he talks a lot about AI and how it's now past the hump. And so, to your point, lots of cool stuff's going to show up. So, fabulous book. Yeah.
No, it's I'll definitely have to check that out because, like I said, I've got a whole series on artificial intelligence, and I've had some authors on it, and it's definitely really, really interesting, and the potential for increasing value to the enriching the human race is really, really great in so many ways, and making a nice interface for getting things done, one that would be more palatable for a larger number of people, I think.
Yeah.
Because it would just be like a little advisor you have in your pocket. It basically could be like your secretary, right? Everybody has a secretary now, and it's their phone. And you don't really care that beneath the surface, your secretary is just running the getting things done flowchart, right? You just care that they always seem to have you doing what you need to be doing at the current moment, and you don't need to worry about it. And you've got that clear space in your head because, Siri's taking care of it for you, right? So,
yep.
Really good stuff. All right. Well, before I let you go, if the listeners would like to, are interested in getting things done, I mean, like what's the best way to get started on this?
A couple of ways. First of all, my book, Getting Things Done, the new edition of it should be available anywhere you can get books. So that's out there. That's a great way to start. And it really walks you, it's a whole manual of it. Part 2 of it actually walks you through the coaching process I actually do with people one-on-one. So it take this here, put this there, whatever. So it's a good how-to manual relative to implementing all this, as well as a kind of big overview of, the stuff you and I have been talking about. And our website, gettingthingsdone.com. Lots of ways to play and things you can check out, that are there. So those are 2 entry points.
Nice. And I'll be sure to link those in the show notes so that they're just a click away for the listeners. And you also have a podcast. I've listened to a few of the episodes of that.
You'll see it from the website. You can sign up to that. They can get onto the newsletter and the podcast. We also have a membership program, the GTD Connect, which is a paid-for membership program. But there's it's just like a huge library of interviews I've done, all kinds of things we've done. Then every once in a while we let some of those out to the public podcast. But there's a huge library of stuff if you're interested in that. But again, you can find out about that at the website.
Right. Yeah. Because for me, it's not, all these other things like the podcast and they're not requirements for implementing, getting things done. But once you start doing it, I've just seen so much value in my life, and I've, realized the subtleties, right? And how I learn more, the more I go back and read the book again, the more I, listen to these podcasts and be like, oh yeah, there is more that I could be getting out of this. Right. Even as we were talking today, I was thinking about one way that I could get more out of the system, that I just, I had some projects that I wasn't getting the progress on them, that I was resisting tackling them, right? And while I was talking to you, I'm like, I've just not really defined what the next actions are for those projects. That's what I need to do. Right. And of course, that's like, GTD 101, right? But sometimes just the more exposure you have to it, the better you get at it, the more you become a master of it. And why would I not want to be a master at running my own life?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, no, you're right on. Just it's hey, come on, I got a black belt in karate. It's always back to basics. Always back to basics.
Right.
Do the basics again. Do them 1,000 times, and then watch how much better you get.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. It's been a real pleasure.
Chris, mutual. Thank you very much. Good luck to you and all your listeners.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that. So glad to have David on the show and express my gratitude towards him personally for that book. It's just, I'm so appreciative for it because it's really made a huge difference in my life. The productivity is just kind of a nice side bonus almost. You know, the productivity that you gain by implementing getting things done, that's a side bonus. The real gain is just the peace of mind of being able to just relax and be like, oh, I got this, you know? Yeah, because at any one point in time, we all have a million things that we have to do. And to be able to relax and be like, you know what? I don't need to stress about it because it's all in my system. And when it's time to work on those things, I know exactly what needs to be done. It's right there. It's a finger press away on my phone. So right now I can just kick back and relax and enjoy this time playing a game with my daughter or going for a walk with my wife or whatever it is. I can be fully present. So that's the real gain from this. The presence, the balance, the perspective, the equilibrium that it brings to your life. So enough about that. If you'd like it, to learn more about it, I've got a link to David's book in the show notes. Click on that, buy the book off of Amazon. If you like the show and you'd like to say thank you, the best way to do that, patreon.com/choiceconversations. There's a link for that in the show notes. Do that, and I would be really thankful. And just thank you for listening in today. As always, it's such an honor to have this time with you. You know, I do appreciate that you give me your ear each and every week. So, love you so much. All right, take care of yourself. And remember, make the choice to be great.